All right, we're now looking at Romans 1 to 4, which is Paul's theology of justification. And we've already shown that Paul brackets his letter with his longing to go to Rome and his plans to go to Rome. And there in chapter 1, right after he states his longing to go to Rome, he's going to open with the theme of this opening section, which is the gospel. And you probably know these verses pretty well. They're very important and memorable. Here in verse 16, it says, Paul says, I am not ashamed of the gospel. What is the gospel? The gospel is the power of God. What does that power accomplish? It accomplishes salvation for everybody, for Jews and for Gentiles. How does it do that? Through faith. For in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed from faith. So that is his kind of quick one-sentence summary of the gospel and of justification. But before Paul goes into a little bit more detail about that justification, he feels it's necessary to establish the universal need for justification by saying that first, he's going to state that all are under sin. In 118 down to 320, he's going to say that all are under sin, both Gentiles and Jews. And just to demonstrate that, Paul's he's gonna summarize this section himself in chapter 3, verse 9. Look at that quickly. Here we are, 3:9. And this is kind of curious. It's actually quite helpful what he does here. First, he's going to ask the question, are Jews better off? And we'll look at that later. He says, we have already charged. He summarizes what he said already to this point. He said, we've already charged that all, both Jews and Gentiles, are under sin, he says. That's my summary of what I've said to this point. But let's get into the nitty-gritty details. I don't have any kind of fun pictures for you in this section. I apologize, no stick figures. But what I have done is I've kind of summarized and simplified what I believe to be the kind of core logical flow of thought and ideas that Paul uses in this section as he's talking about Jews and Gentiles being under sin. And we're going to take a look first at 118 to 32, where he makes the case that Gentiles are under sin, under God's wrath, and have no excuse. Now, you'd think that they would have an excuse before God. The law hasn't been revealed to me, but he says that there has been something that has been revealed to you. I have revealed, God says, enough of my person and my will for you to make a choice, to obey or disobey. But what did you do? What did you do with that revelation, that knowledge? You suppressed that knowledge, and you performed a series of exchanges. This chapter lists 3 exchanges, all having to do with idolatry, and God responds by giving them up to their own decisions. Let's see how this works out in 118 to 32. All right, jump back up to 118. All right, the wrath of God is revealed against, in this case, Gentiles, and they're without excuse. Why? Because what can be known about God is plain to them, because God showed it to them. He revealed that to the Gentiles, his invisible attributes, eternal power, divine nature, clearly perceived in nature, in the things that have been made. What did they do with it? They suppressed this truth in unrighteousness. What did that do to their minds? It says they became futile in their thinking, and they performed a series of exchanges. Look at this in purple. They exchanged the glory of God for images. They exchanged the truth about God, and instead of worshiping him, they worshiped the creature. Therefore, 3 times, look at this, 1, 2, 3, God gave them up. It says he gave them up in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies. That's kind of a curious sin to focus in on, and we get a little bit more clarity in the next giving up statement here in 26, where it says that God gave them up to dishonorable passions. Women exchanged natural relations for those contrary to nature. Men did the same. And here we have the New Testament's teaching against homosexuality. It's kind of the most clear passage on that subject. You can look at Leviticus 18 and 20 for the Old Testament's teaching against that sin. And so that's kind of his case. That's Paul's case that Gentiles are under sin without excuse. He's going to then turn his attention to Jews in chapter 2. Specifically, he's going to kind of lay down the hammer in verses 1 to 5 and 17 to 24, saying that Jews are also under sin. And why is that? Well, he's going to give the Jews a name. He's going to call them the judge. He's going to say, you, the judge, you judge Gentiles for practicing such things, a whole list and litany of sins, and yet, Paul says, you practice them as well. You practice the very same things. Therefore, you got no excuse. This is chapter 2. You have no excuse, Jew, everyone who judges, because you judge those who practice those things, yet you do them yourself. You, the judge, practice the very same things. And this is going to open up a kind of a debate. So God judges by works. Paul is going to make the case. He judges by works such that a Gentile who is uncircumcised, if he keeps the law, it says that his uncircumcision is regarded as circumcision. And there are probably Jews in Rome who would be pulling out their hair when they heard this. And then he's also going to say that those Gentiles who do not have the law, if they keep the law, they are a law to themselves, Paul says. So he's going to then have this imaginary debate with a interlocutor, it's called, and he's going to answer the question, well then, what's the point of being a Jew? What is the advantage for a Jew if the Gentile can be counted as circumcised just by keeping the law? And he's going to say, yes, there's an advantage to being a Jew, but then not really. Let's take a look at that in chapter 3. This is just kind of me laying out Paul's argument here in these chapters. He asks the question twice. What advantage has the Jew? Is there any value? Well, yeah, there is in every way. To begin with, the Jews are entrusted with the law. They're given the law. And then he's going to ask again in verse 9, are Jews any better off? Well, first he said yes. Now he's going to say no. Because though they were given the law, by the works of the law, no human being will be justified. Now think about how this contributes to Paul's purpose, which is unity between Jews and Gentiles in Rome. He's going to say that you guys, both Jews and Gentiles, are equally lost, but you are equally saved as well. He's going to make the transition here at verse 3:21. You're saved in the same way, by grace through faith, no grounds for boasting. So in 3:21, he's going to say, but now, it's a great moment of transition, but now the righteousness of God is revealed through faith apart from the law. And what's the significance of it being apart from the law? Well, if it's apart from the law, well, that means there's no distinction between Jews and Gentiles. And also, there's no grounds for boasting. You can't boast in your fulfillment of the law because justification is through faith, not through the law. Let's take a look at that in 3:21 to 31. All right. Righteousness of God is revealed apart from the law through faith. And let's see how this section really focuses on unity. Everyone is united in their justification and righteousness through faith before God. So he says there is no distinction between Jews and Gentiles, for everyone, Jews and Gentiles, have sinned and are justified in the same manner. And then look at this. He asks, well, then what's the ground of our boasting? Boasting is excluded. You can't boast in the law. Therefore, there is a sameness. Remember what we said earlier? The ground is level before the cross. God is not just the God of the Jews, but also the Gentiles, because he will justify the circumcised, the Gentiles, by faith, and the uncircumcised through faith. And now Paul is going to give an example. He's going to give the example of righteousness through faith, and that is Abraham. And Abraham is this quintessential, he's the father of Israel. But Paul's going to turn it around. He's going to say, no, he's the father of Gentiles too. You see, Abraham, he was justified by faith, and it's critical. When was he justified by faith? He was justified by faith before he was circumcised. And let's take a look at the text, and it will demonstrate for us the significance of this temporal marker. So, chapter 4, Abraham, it says he believed God, and that belief, that faith, was counted to him as righteousness. And he asks, well then, how was it counted? Was it before or after he was circumcised? It was not after, but before. And therefore, as a result of that, he received the sign of circumcision simply as a seal of the righteousness that he had by faith while he was circumcised. So remember back to Genesis. Abraham was circumcised in chapter 17, but he was counted righteous by faith in chapter 15. And what did this do? This means the purpose of this was to make Abraham the father of all who believe without being circumcised, Gentiles, and to make him the father of the circumcised who also have faith like Abraham. So, Abraham is the father of Jews and Gentiles, and there's no grounds for boasting as well. You can see that in verse 2 of this chapter. So this is Paul's theology of justification, and you can see how it contributes to a unity between Jews and Gentiles. Now, I want to point out one other structural feature of the book of Romans. Each of these major sections are going to conclude with a doxological, confessional statement of worship and praise. It's going to be in the first half of chapter 5. I think it's 1 through 11. It's going to be the last few verses of chapter 8, and the last few of chapter 11, and then in chapter 15 as well. It's going to have these confessional statements. And let's take a look at this one here in the beginning of chapter 5, in which Paul is going to rejoice in the fact that we have hope even in our suffering. Okay, scroll down to chapter 5. So after his treatment of Abraham, he's going to list some of the benefits of justification. He's just laid out that Jews and Gentiles are justified, and now he's going to talk about some of the benefits of that justification. Well, one of them is we've got peace with God. We've got access into his grace, and this is super interesting. It says, we rejoice in the hope of God. Now, this word rejoice, it's the same word for boast. Let's scroll back up to chapter 4, something to boast about. That's ka'amai. See that? Boast? Look over here. We rejoice. Ka'amai. In other words, we boast now. We boast not in the law. We don't boast in our keeping of the law, but rather we boast in the hope given to us through our justification by faith. And this is a hope which is in the face of suffering. Let's see, where does it mention suffering here? Here we go. We rejoice in our sufferings. Now we're going to see similar themes of hope and suffering in some of these doxological confessional statements as we continue in these lectures.